Good afternoon. This recording is for Pre-Algebra Chapter 7, Lesson 7, Simple and Compound Interest. Had I chosen to, I could have taught you how to do this using a table, but let me tell you, it's a major pain in the bottom, so I didn't have you do it. Instead, I'm going to teach you how to use the formula for simple and compound interest. But first off, what is interest? Well, interest is the money you make when you loan money to someone, or the money you pay when someone loans money to you. So let's assume you are a bank. And this is actually how banks make money. They take your money, and usually it's kind of like in a savings account. So let's say I'm the bank and you are a kid with a savings account. So what it is you put your money into a savings account and you hold on to it and you hold on to it and you hold on to it. As the bank, I am going to take some of your money and I'm going to invest it, or I'm going to loan it to other people. So what's going to happen is basically because you're letting me borrow your money, I'm saying I'm going to pay you interest, and it's usually going to be a pretty small amount, like 2 or 3%. Very tiny. Sometimes it's less than that. And then basically what it is it says that I say that because you're letting me borrow money from you to go do other things with, I'm going to pay you interest on it, and I'm going to give you a little extra plus what you had before as payback for letting me borrow your money. Now what I'm going to do as the bank is I'm then going to loan this money, some that I borrowed from you, some that I borrowed from another person, and so on, to loan it out to another person. And I say, I'm going to loan you this money, but you have to pay me interest. And normally when the bank loans money to something else, the interest rate is higher. So even though I'm only paying you like 1 or 2% interest on your money, I'm charging interest to the person I'm loaning the money to. Usually like 5 to 10 or even 20% depending on the type of loan. So basically they have to pay me back the money that I loaned them plus up to 20%. Now up to is like a vague, it matters what the terms of the agreement are, but they have to pay me back the interest. And then what I do with that interest and say, well, to you, the person who loaned me the money in their savings account, I'm now going to pay you back a little, but like 1%. So even though I made up to like 20% off the person I loaned the money to, I then have to give out some of that to the people I borrowed the money from, but I also have to make money myself. So that's basically how interest is. You can make interest when you loan someone money, or you can pay interest if you're the person borrowing the money. All right? We can talk more about this in class if it's not making sense. It's something that a lot of adults have to deal with. Okay, so let's talk about some of the vocabulary when it comes to this stuff. Principal is the initial deposit. So principal is like you putting money into the savings account. Let's say you put $100 into a savings account. That's the principal. And then the interest is paid as a percentage based on that principal. So if I say I'm going to pay you 1%, that's 1 out of 100. So for every $100, I'm going to give you $1. So if at the end of the year, if that's the terms of the savings account, you have $100 and you kept $100 in there, I'm going to give you $1. But guess what? That's $1 you didn't have to do anything for other than keep your money in that account. All right? Now let's say I am loaning somebody money. And I say, all right, I'm going to loan you $100, and the interest rate is 3%. That means for every $100 you're borrowing from me, you have to pay me an extra $3 back. All right? So if you borrowed $200 at 3%, you have to pay me back the $200 you borrowed plus $6 extra for the courtesy of using my money for however long the loan is. Okay? So let's go ahead and talk about simple interest. Simple interest is interest paid only on the principal, and then we will talk about something that's a little different in just a minute. It's obviously not simple interest, it's the other one, compound interest. So this is a very simple equation. I equals PRT, where P, R, and T are all multiplied together. P is the interest, I is the interest, P is the principal, T is time, and it's always in years, and R is the interest rate, and R is the percentage, the 3%, the 4%, the 5%, the 6%. Those are all the percentages, and R is always written as a decimal, okay, and you should know how to convert a percentage into a decimal by now. All right, so again, the money you loan to someone is in the bank, and its interest is equal to the principal times the interest rate, which is a decimal, times the time in years. And there you go. All right, so let's go ahead and do a problem with this. Now, R is interest rate as a decimal. Just remember that. I forgot to write that out for you. All right, so let's go ahead and find the simple interest of a principal of $250 with an interest rate of 4% over the course of 3 years. Now, this could be basically you putting money into a savings account. The bank says we're going to pay you 4% over the course of 3 years based on your principal. All right. Now, they might be putting money in each year, but it actually doesn't count to the new simple interest. It doesn't count. It's just over the course of 3 years, they're going to pay you 4%. So, interest is equal to 250, which is the principal, all right? The P in PRT, times the rate as a decimal, so 4% is the same as 0.04, and T is time in years, through 3 years. So if we multiply that all together, we're going to get $30. That means that after 3 years of keeping $250 in the bank, you're going to get a free 30 bucks. And this is about the only time where you're going to get free money, and that's when you let someone else borrow your money and they pay you back plus a little extra, which is the interest. All right, so now what happens if we do $250 at 3.5% for 6 months? And you're like, but Miss TH, time is always in years. Well, you know what? If we have less than 1 year, then we have to have our time be less than 1. Okay, so we're going to have the principal. Oh, by the way, the principal plus the $30 is how much you owe or how much someone owes you. Okay, so they're going to pay you back the $250 plus the $30 extra. Okay, or if you owe someone $250, you have to pay them the extra $30 of principal. All right, so let's go ahead and do this next problem where we only have 6 months instead of a year. Well, it's the same principle as before, a slightly less percentage rate, and instead of 3 years or even 1 year, we have half a year, which is 6 months out of 12, which reduces to a half, which is the same as 0.5. Okay, you get that? Okay, is that making sense? That is 6 months out of a total of 12 is half. All right, so let's go ahead and figure out the interest. The interest is equal to $4.38. If I multiply all those things together, I'm going to get $4.38. Well, if I was loaning money to somebody and whatnot, I'd probably want more out of them. So getting $4.38 isn't much, but hey, it's more than you had before. Okay, so now let's talk about compound interest. Compound interest is when the bank pays interest of the principal and the interest an account has earned. So at the end of 1 year, you have your principal and your interest, right? Now, after a second year, they're going to calculate the new interest off of this, all right? Off of the new balance, which includes the interest from the previous year or the previous time period, all right? So the new balance is what the bank uses to calculate the next interest payment. And that's this very crazy equation right here that I just drew and lined through. There we go. Balance is equal to the principal times 1 plus the rate to the n power. All right? That's what that exponent is, the n power. Where b is the balance, that's the final. It's after how many times it's been calculated and over and over and over again. If you just let the money sit, at what point you would have, how much money would be in there. Principal is still the initial principal. It's like the $250 from the previous problem. The interest rate is still a decimal, and n is an exponent, which is the number of interest periods. And an interest period is the length of time over which the interest is calculated. And it's usually the number of intervals. So if we're going by annual, which means this is calculated once a year, n would be the number of years we do this. Now, I'm also going to talk about on the next slide when it's semi-annually, when it's happening more than once a year. You could do it biannually or triannually or quadrannually, and I don't even know if I said that right. But the number of times that this happens could be per year, but the interest rate is always per year. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about that one. Remember to follow PEMDAS. You need to do parentheses, then the exponent, then multiplication. Okay? All right. So, when you're dealing with semi-annual, when the compound is semi-annually, hold on one second. Sorry about that. Mr. Michaels walked in. Where was I? Okay, so, yeah. let's back up some. Okay, so when interest is compounded semi-annually, taken twice a year, 3 times a year, 4 times a year, you must divide the interest rate by the number of interest periods. But you also must calculate the number of interest periods. So here's the big deal. For the interest period, since it's 5 years, semi-annually means usually twice, it means that you actually have 10 interest periods, right? 5 years, twice a year, that's 10 times it happens, all right? But you also need to divide the rate in half because it's not, the rate is always annual. It's always annual. So if it's 6%, you're really getting 3% because you're only doing half a year, all right? Now, if it was 3 times a year, you'd need to divide the percentage by 3. Is this making sense? So if you need a little clarification about this, either in class or on the quiz, just ask, because I can remind you what needs to happen for each of those, okay? All right, so 6% semi-annually means 3% for each interest period, okay? So let's go ahead and do this, actually. All right, so remember what we talked about, which is, I shrank it down up here, and then let's go ahead and find the balance for each account. Okay, so account deposited, which is the principal, was $900. So let's say you have a savings account that has compounded interest, annually interest, okay? And we're going to do it for 3 years, and we're doing this, we're compounding annually. So this is the one we're doing for A, right there, okay? So we're going to take the $900, we're going to multiply it by 1 plus the rate. Well, the rate is 2%, but as a decimal, it's 0.01, so it's 1 plus 0.0, or 1, excuse me, the interest rate is 2%, which is 0.02, so it's going to be 1 plus 0.02 to the 3 years, because that's how many interest periods we have, okay? So now I'm going to do simplify inside the parentheses first, then I'm going to do the exponent, which is this huge long number, and then I'm going to multiply it by the principal, which means I'm going to get $955.09. So I get my $900 back plus $55.09 after 3 years at 2% interest. And that's just if I left the $900 in there, okay? Now, if you were to keep this going, obviously, you're going to get more and more and more and more money, which is how you could technically be a millionaire if you started putting $50 in the bank at age like 2. It's just going to compound and compound and compound and compound and compound, and as long as you don't touch the money, it's going to keep growing for you, okay? So let's talk about part B, where it is compounding semi-annually. This is where we have to change up some stuff. It's still $900, but the interest rate is half, because we're doing it twice a year. But it also means that the number of periods, of interest periods, which is my exponent, is now 6. Because I'm doing it twice a year for 3 years, which means that's going to be 6. 2 times 3 is 6. So now if I do the math, it's going to be slightly off, and as you can tell, my numbers are a little different, and I've actually made about, what, 12 more cents or something like that, or 13 more cents? Something like that, 22 cents more, whatever that ends up being. Something like that. Oh, I can do the math for you. Let me do that. So 37 minus 9 cents is, yeah, you've made 28 cents more if you compounded semi-annually. Not a big difference, but you know, it might start adding up later. So there you go. So that's compounded simple interest. Just make sure you know the equations. You know which letter means what. I'll make sure I write the equations on the board for your tests and quizzes so you don't have to memorize them, but it would help if you memorized them. Okay. So I'll talk to you guys later, and try not to stress about this. All right, bye guys.